RugbyRenegade.com, the #1 online strength and conditioning program for rugby. Are you ready to get bigger, stronger, fitter, and faster and dominate your opposition? Welcome to the Rugby Renegade podcast, where we build machines.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Rugby Renegade podcast. This podcast is fueled by PAS Nutrition. Check out their awesome supplements at pas-nutrition.co.uk, and don't forget that subscribers to rugbyrenegade.com receive a 40% discount on retail price, so check that out. Anyway, today's podcast, it's a great pleasure to interview Ben Franks, a dual World Cup winning All Black, who's currently plying his trade in the Championship with London Irish in their battle for promotion. Ben is obviously, a really experienced player, but he's very passionate about his strength and conditioning and is a keen trainer. And he gives us a really good insight into his day-to-day training and what it takes to get to the top as a professional rugby player. So give it a listen and let us know what you think. Hi Ben, welcome to the Rugby Renegade podcast. Now I doubt you'll need much of an introduction. I'm sure most of our listeners will have heard of you, but why don't you start by sort of telling us about your playing career and where you've kind of developed your passion for strength and conditioning as well.
Yeah, g'day. So I turned professional in 2005. With Canterbury, which is sort of our provincial competition, and went on from there to play Super Rugby with the Crusaders up until 2012, and then I had 3 seasons at the Hurricanes before moving over here to London Irish, and then on the side of that played for the All Blacks from 2008 till 2015. So that's the a very short overview of my playing career. Training wise, got into training. My dad sort of got me into training probably around 13. Just like most people get into it, went for a run and just enjoyed the feeling I got from training and working hard, and then I've been pretty lucky that I found that rugby is something I'm very passionate about too, but also training is something also it's a big part of my job, but it's also something I'm a passion, or call it a hobby, or I really enjoy it too. So I've sort of been lucky to have 2 things that sort of go side by side with each other.
Yeah, definitely. I know some players who kind of they dread the gym stuff, so it's good that you can enjoy both. I won't mention any names, but anyway. So obviously you said you've moved from the Southern Hemisphere to Northern Hemisphere, and you're now with London Irish. How have you found the move? What have you found different?
Well, the move has been great, and a couple of my reasons for moving over was I've travelled over here a lot and sort of seen some things but never really got to experience much. So I wanted it to be like an experience for my family and to travel. So that side of it has been great. The other side of it, the rugby, sort of stumbled into London Irish at probably not the best time of their history, with a relegation battle straight after a World Cup. So that side of it's been a bit turbulent. But this season, we dropped down to the Championship. I suppose the most rewarding thing this year, which I probably haven't really had with any of the teams I've played for, is London Irish is sort of starting at a complete rebuild, so it has been enjoyable being with a team or an organisation that is so dedicated and motivated to becoming better.
Yeah, that sounds great. And sort of strength and conditioning wise, have you seen much difference in what you were doing down the Southern Hemisphere, moving up here?
Yeah, there's the biggest difference is travel and the competitions. So back home, you can play in 2 or 3 different competitions. So for me, most of the time, I was Super Rugby for pretty much from now the summer months until July, and then you either went from there to another team, your provincial competition, or into international rugby. So you might work with 2 or 3 different trainers a year, and on top of that, the travel is a lot. I know here they'll talk away, an away game for us. Going to Gloucester, it's a big thing. 3 hours drive away. But in the Super Rugby, you're talking about New Zealand to South Africa, which is 20 hours plus travel. So how that affects your training is here. I felt I can just be more consistent, as in really planning out and be able to stick to. Week to week, it's pretty consistent how I'm going to feel, come Monday. And Super Rugby was different. It was difficult because you had to have travel on it. And, when you're traveling, you don't have always the ideal, you don't always have the food you need. The gym can be a public gym. So your training, is probably not quite as consistent.
Yeah, and touching on that, because I know I saw Nick Gill talk, the All Blacks S&C coach, and he was saying about, obviously, the All Blacks, they don't have they don't have their own gym. They're always travelling about in different gyms. How have you and they coped in that sort of environment where you're travelling around, you don't exactly know what you're going to get?
Yeah, so New Zealand, they don't have it. It's not like in England where so the national team here will always play at Twickenham, and they'll have their training ground in Penny Hill, I think. So so then you know what you're going to get week to week. The All Blacks travel, and I've travelled everywhere from state of the art training facilities to Argentina, where they took us into a basement that had a barbell and something maybe a little bit better than concrete weights, so everyone's a bit different on their approach, but the way I sort of combated it was just keeping my training to the bare basics, because I know as long as I got a barbell and some weights, I could pretty much do the sort of the meat and potatoes of my workout, so that helped me be consistent. As long as I can squat, deadlift, press something, I can be pretty consistent on what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great advice. Get the main compound lifts should always be the bulk of your program. So it's great to have you're our second player on the podcast, and it's great to have the insight from a player's sort of perspective. What or could you kind of describe a normal training day for you, a sort of day in the life?
So probably I'd start my training week from Sunday. So play Saturday. Sunday is I'll really concentrate on recovery and eating and prepping my food for the week. It's sort of, I look at Sunday as a day for setting up my whole week. And there's nothing worse than turning up to Monday and you're still feeling crap from Saturday. So I make sure I do Sunday right, because it sort of sets you up for the whole week. Monday, Tuesday, for most rugby players would be your heaviest days in terms of what you're doing team-wise. But so Monday I usually do my heavy sort of upper body training, any extra fitness I want to do depending on minutes I've played, plus review, preview, opposition. Tuesday I'll do lower body. I hate splitting it up because they're all really whole bodies, but probably more like the squats and the heavy pulls and stuff, and that sort of leads into the scrummaging work we do that day. It's a double day also, so it's a tough session that most teams do around the world, I suppose. Wednesday will be a day off, which is sort of similar again to my Sunday. I'll use it to prep food and make sure I'm really ready to go for Saturday. Thursday again, I'll do it'll be a power / sort of a couple of upper body movements or anything else I think I need going into the weekend. I usually any extra skill work I need to do then I'll usually turn up an hour before to sort of get that right. And then everything there, as long as you've done the early part of the week right, everything just flows into to game day there, and then you just repeat that for 10 months of the year.
no easy feat. No, that's really good insight, like, especially like the way you're talking about using your Sundays and your Wednesdays, getting your food prepared, because it's always a bugbear of mine. I feel people worry about what exactly they need to eat, but it's more things like that of getting the practicalities of getting the organisation in, that the food is there for them to eat, if you know what I mean. That's where things that they really get let down. Yeah,
I know everyone's always looking. They'll ask you questions. What does it take to be, maybe a high level athlete, or how do you stay there? And one thing that's overlooked a lot is just consistency. Like, there's enough experts or so-called experts out there telling you things you should do, and they're not far wrong, but the hardest thing is being able to do that day after day after day, the days when you don't want it, especially the Sunday. That's why I always put a big emphasis on Sundays, because, after a game, sore, tired, depending on how you played, your mood levels, you might not be the best person to be around, but, if you can really set yourself up for that day, it goes a long way for you being consistent on game days. So, yeah, just those small things, like I said, prepping your food. What does it take? Half an hour, but having that discipline to do that consistently, it goes a long way to allow you to do what you want to do, and that's to perform on game day and to have a long career.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I quite like is where you're talking about the skill, especially coming from a prop, and some obviously. We talk a lot about the strength and conditioning side of things, but the skill thing is so important. And what sort of stuff would you work on that Thursday?
Yes, I break my week down into. So again, on Sunday, I'll plan the skills I want to do for the week, just because then I don't miss it, and I don't overdo it. So pretty much all players need to be able to. You need to be able to tackle. You need to be efficient at, ruck clean out. You need to be able to catch, pass, ball carry, different lines you run, and plus also your position work, which for me, a lot of it is around scrum, maul, and line out. So how I break that down is just depending on what you need to do more of at the time. So, there might be a few weeks with scrums is going really well. So maybe I only need to add in extras outside of team training, once, but maybe some of my clean-out work hasn't been up to scratch from the analysis I've done in the game, plus talking with coaches. So I might put down that as a high priority, and I might train that every day. So it just depends, really. It's not very often that you are doing everything so well that you don't need to do a little bit of everything. But I just find you don't spread them out evenly. If there's something that really needs that's lagging behind, you train that more often, and things that are going well, you do enough to keep it going the way it needs to be, and that's just how I spread it out. So it's very individual, but you do need to make sure, again, just that planning, so nothing's being overlooked.
Yeah. I think that's great advice for people to actually look at their game and see what they need to work on. Now, let's move back to sort of strength and conditioning. What part of training do you enjoy the most?
Well, I definitely enjoy being in the gym more than being out on the field doing conditioning. It's probably as when you're 120 kgs, it's hard to really run natural. You look over, you see the wingers, and they just run. It looks effortless. Me, it feels like everything's such hard work. And like I said, I do like all parts of training, but I probably enjoy, still more of the traditional lifts of the deadlifts, squats. When I was younger, I was very much into the Olympic lifts. Even that's sort of really how I started a lot of my weightlifting. I've sort of had to back off that a little bit just through a few injuries I've got over time. But those ones I enjoy because they're just I don't want to say they're a simple exercise, but you can see results quite quick, and there's nothing better than when you're squatting or deadlifting. It gives you confidence, and you take that into other areas of your game.
Yeah, and so you say you've backed off a bit on the Olympic lifting. Have you sort of completely stopped, or have you had to modify the lifts?
Well, I have. When I first started, me and Owen were going to an Olympic lifting club in Christchurch, so I must have been 16 by then, and Owen's probably about 13, and we did that for ages, and it's probably just in the last few years I've backed off, but I would have based a lot of my training off the Olympic lifts. It's just more, I suppose, one of the hazards of playing prop is, especially at tight head, you get your you sort of get your arm barred anytime there's a collapse. So over years, I suppose I've just lost a bit of range in my elbow, and so more than 3 or 4 weeks of going heavy in cleans or snatches. They start to get a bit sore. So I suppose the risk and reward's just not really there now for Olympic lifts, but that doesn't mean I'm not still doing the exercises. I do a lot of like the bar complexes, especially warming up for stuff, so I can keep the good flexibility that those exercise gives you, still getting the explosiveness through the hips. I've stole all of Ed's medicine ball exercises, so that sort of keeps me, powerful. But no, I just can't really go as heavy as I used to be able to in those exercises.
Yeah. And you mentioned Ed. He was, of course, the very first podcast guest we had. Tell us about your training with him and sort of how you got in touch with him and the work you did with him.
Yeah, so in 2006, when I first made the Crusaders, I walked into the gym one day and there's this huge Texan lifting massive weights, and I decided I needed to know this guy. That's about it. So I remember walking over and just chewing his ear off, asking him about weights. I did ask him what he eats, but that probably wasn't the best advice. He told me he was going to the burger and fish and chip shopper across the road a few times a day. So I didn't take that advice on, but it's just one of those sort of friendships. When you meet someone, we just got on like house on fire straight away. So we kept in contact, and then a couple of things happened. 2011. Was it 2011? We had the earthquakes in Christchurch, and pretty much lost our training base. And that season for the Crusaders, we had no home ground, so we travelled away every game. And up until then, I'd sort of been allowed to do my own training. I pretty much programmed my own stuff. But I knew then with the travel, I needed, and I was probably training a bit too much. I needed someone to look over my shoulder and give me more guidance, and that's sort of how me and Ed started working together, and it worked really well for me. That year had a really good year, and then I decided I needed to bring him out to help me, in our short pre-season window to sort of set me up for a year, and I did that for 4 or 5 years. I brought Ed out every summer, so he did my stuff all the way up until I've moved over here. And the way Ed likes to train is just we fit really good together. He sort of got good knowledge in the Olympic lifts, what I enjoyed at the time, but also that sort of that power bodybuilding sort of training too. He incorporated in it, and even though I'd been training since I was 13, I probably wasn't really good at managing myself. As in, I sort of come from the mindset every time I went in the gym, I've got to lift heavy or heavier than the week before. Even when I was tired. So to have someone to actually control the volume and intensity that I trained at, it helped a lot, and it sort of taught me how to actually, sometimes it's all right to back off. So, yeah.
Definitely. Now, this is a question we ask all our guests, and it's, what do you think is the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
Just going too heavy too early. I think it's a lot better over here. Guys get into it a lot earlier, but a big mistake I've seen in New Zealand is, guys might not get into the gym until 18, but then they want to progress to the weights that a guy who maybe when he started when he was 16, within 6 months. Weight training, it's a long game. You can't expect to get these numbers, within 6 months, or what you need to lift might be more or less than the guy next to you. So I think that's where sort of a lot of injuries come from, or sort of bad habits come into. So in terms of strength training, I would always encourage people to get into it as soon as possible. As an end goal would be, having that sort of strength you need by the time you start playing against men.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we've kind of touched on nutrition slightly. And I know you said you get lots of queries about what you eat and stuff, and you could probably talk for hours about it. But I think what would be really helpful would be to sort of explain what you eat building up to a match. So what's your sort of match day routine?
Yeah, so well, in New Zealand, like for a lot of my career, my games were at 7:30, so it was a big day of eating to make sure you're right for them. So, but here most games are at 2:30, so I've had to make quite a few adjustments. So here for my game, well, nutrition's 7 days a week really, but the build into the game really for a Saturday game starts Friday if you're going to play at 2:30. So you're going to make sure, usually Friday's a lighter day, so you're going to make sure that you've got the right calories, the right food in you to be able to recover from the week's training, but also that you don't wake up Saturday morning and you're already dehydrated and you're already malnourished to a degree. So the biggest thing is just really planning. So the night before I'll write down the times that I need to eat. So usually for a 2:30 game I'll make sure I'll make my breakfast the night before, and I'll get up at 6, eat it by 6:30, which is usually I just like to keep the foods that I know I can that don't sit heavy in my stomach. So things like eggs, oats. I keep it pretty plain. Then a few hours from there, probably around 9, I'll have like a shake. Not too much protein because again they'll leave you a bit full, but probably more carb heavy. So you can have a serving of protein, but I usually go with like an almond milk because again it sits in my stomach better. Bananas, some berries, you can put some whatever you want in there, a bit of honey. Then I have my pre-match meal, so probably around 11. Have it eaten by 11:30, which is I keep it really simple again. I'll go for like some sort of chicken mince just because it's ground up about 200 grams. So again, it's not too much protein, and then I'll make up probably about 250, 300 grams worth of like a mashed sweet potato. And just again, it's a good carbohydrate, and it's just easy to digest. And then about an hour and a half before a kickoff, I'll have a banana, and I might have a small serving of protein powder with water. So that'd be leading into a game, and then just throughout the day, make sure I've kept my hydration up. So straight out of bed, I'll probably drink 500, 600 mils of water, and then just keep topping it up through the day. But again, the hydration really comes into it the day before. You want to make sure you're hydrated before you go to bed. No, not so much where you have to get up 3 times during the night to take a piss, but so you wake up not staining the toilet.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. Now, obviously, you've played. You've had an impressive career in Northern and Southern Hemisphere. Who is the most physical player you've played with or against?
Oh, geez, it's always a hard one, those sort of questions, because, who's the toughest person to scrum against, who's the most physical, because sort of when you get to a level, they all are. But I'd probably have to say my brother, just because, like I said, we've been training partners since, I started training at 13, and it was only like a couple of years after that Owen started training too. So we've been training partners since, like I said, at least since I was 14, and Owen would have been 11, 12. I think why we made such good training partners for each other is that we were quite competitive, when we trained, to the amusement of some people who might have been close and watching. I was always in the gym. It was always good to, Owen was very good at the Olympic lifts, and I was always a bit stronger at sort of like the sort of powerlifting style lifts. So we pushed each other there. We always did our conditioning together. The guy Scotty Hansen, he's been training us for a long time too on a lot of our skill work. Whenever we were doing tackling drills, doing our scrum drills, when I was playing loose head, it was always against each other. So so steel sharpens steel. So I had a perfect training partner, and I'm sure Owen would say the same. So some of my toughest things I've done is usually because, it was against Owen.
Yeah, that's competition's so important, isn't it? To push you on mentally and physically.
Yeah, and that's the if you want to get to the top level and in any sport or maybe in anything, but you got to be comfortable competing. Because it just brings the best out of you, and there's nothing wrong when you compete, and you might come off second best. Then you can go back, look at what you didn't quite do well, and you can come back stronger and better the next time. So, and competition only brings that out of you, because if you only compete against someone who's not going to bring that out of you, you'll never learn, because it'll be until the time it's too late, that one game where you really need to nail it, and you didn't find out those lessons, off the field. So I encourage as much competition as you can, and especially find a training partner who, so you don't even have to be best mates with them, but if he brings something out of you that you can't bring out of yourself, it's probably somewhat good to have.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we've talked about a lot of things that can lead to success, like competition and consistency, and you've been part of probably one of the most successful rugby teams in history, the All Blacks. What do you think is behind their success? I mean, it's not an easy question to answer, but you've been in that environment. How would you explain it to someone, an outsider?
Yeah, I suppose there's plenty of moving parts, but I think, and I don't know what it's like to be in a dressing room of another international team to compare, but for the All Blacks, I just believe that in New Zealand, rugby's king. And when you're in the All Blacks and say you get your first cap or it's your first game, you've got to stand up and you say a few words. And nearly everyone's story is exactly the same as, I watched the All Blacks as a kid. It was the thing I've wanted to do my whole life, so on and so forth. So I think the All Blacks is a unique team because it's not a team that you can just stumble into or by chance you get into it. You've generally had a passion to play for this team since you're a kid, since you knew about money, since you knew about sponsorship or anything. As a kid you would just do anything to have an opportunity to put that jersey on, and if you're lucky enough when you get that opportunity, it's just something you want to make the most of. So I just think to get a group of guys that are usually like-minded and driven, just to not let the people in New Zealand down, but also people who have worn that jersey before you. I think it's quite a powerful thing.
Yeah, they obviously got a great legacy, and I'm sure it must have been great to have been a part of. So moving forward, Ben, what does the future hold for you?
Right now, I'm just focused on this promotion battle with London Irish. That's everything I'm working hard towards now. One of my big reasons coming over here is I really wanted to play in the Premiership. It's something I've watched from afar for a long time, and seeing it's such a tough competition, I wanted to make sure I experienced it. So I've only really had a taste, so I really want to experience it with London Irish again. So that's all my focus now, is on that rugby wise and training wise. Just making the most of this year. There's probably a bit more downtime at the minute compared to when you're in the Premiership. So just trying to make myself bigger, stronger, faster. Oh, well, maybe not faster, but other things. So just trying to make the most of the time I'm having this season, and that's it. And that's pretty much the same I've been doing since I was, I don't know, a long time ago, I suppose. So I'll just keep doing that until I've got to do something else.
Yeah, great. And where can people learn more about you, Ben?
Well, I already said I try to keep a little bit updated on Instagram. I'm taking photos of myself. But yeah, just Ben_Franks at 01 on Instagram is probably the best place to keep a little bit updated on what I'm doing. And you can sort of message me through there. I try my best to help people out when they do message me, because when I was a kid I was that annoying guy emailing everyone and anyone to find out anything. So I try to repay the favour, but yeah, that's the best place.
Yeah, that's great, and we'll share links to that in the show notes. And I think that's great. We've all been there in those shoes, emailing people and reaching out for help. So it's great that you're in a position you can give back.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of people ask me about training and stuff, but one bit of advice I also like to give is that reading. I do a lot of reading. Like I said, I'm I'm passionate about strength and conditioning. So, but I think a good way for people to learn now is, instead of just being given information, to really go out and seek it. So a couple websites that I buy most of my books from is ironmind.com and superstrengthtraining.com, and they just have a great range of books of guys from the 40s and 50s and 60s, the stuff they were doing. They just have strength manuals, stuff you can read if you're a bit of a meathead like me and feel confident to go straight to the gym and give it a go. So I'd encourage guys to do a little bit of research yourself, and I think it'll help your training a lot better than probably maybe YouTube and everything.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. Any books in particular you'd recommend?
I think for definitely a young rugby player, I'd recommend Olympic Weightlifting for Athletes by Greg Everett.
Yep.
He's got a number of great books, but that one is a good manual. Another one I liked, this is pretty old school, is Paul Anderson. No one will probably know who he is, but he is a powerlifter and Olympic lifting champion from the 50s. He's got a book called Sports and Weights and Sports, and it's just a training manual where he gives some great simple advice. There's Dr. Fred Hatfield's got another good book. Well, he's got heaps of good books, but powerlifting, a scientific approach, is a good basic place to start. And Ed Cohen also actually has a good book I enjoyed, very similar, really good detailing around the basic lifts anyone should know if you want to get into the gym, squats, deadlifts, pressing.
It's quite funny actually that we're always looking for new information, and a lot of it dates back to what they were doing then. That they've sort of done it all before, and it's almost like we're reinventing it, but we actually find out what people were doing in the past with success.
Oh yeah, and some of the stuff you read is just amazing. And actually, I was in we're going off topic a little bit, but I was in Iceland a few weeks ago, and I did some training over there, and they have the manhood stones, and there was these stones, I can't remember what they're called in Icelandic, but it pretty much translated to the fisherman stones, and these stones were used to pretty much to see who got paid what and who got the best part on the boat, when you had to row out. And I think the top stone was 150 kgs, which was called full strength, and it was all the way down to 30 kgs, which was translated to weakling. So 100 plus, well, maybe a couple hundred years ago, guys were lifting 150 kg stones. Their training was rowing a boat every day and doing some farm work. So there's lots of different ways to get strength, and people have been strong for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for spending your time with us, and we'll wish you all the best with your promotion battle with London Irish this season.
Cheers, thank you very much.
So thank you, Ben. Another great podcast. It's great to have you on to discuss all things training and rugby, and give an insight into what's worked for you at the highest level, and all the best with the promotion battle with London Irish this season. In the meantime, guys, please subscribe to the podcast to stay in tune. Get more podcasts coming out with some more players and top S&C coaches. Please subscribe to us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, whatever podcast you use, and please give us a 5-star review. And in the meantime, check out rugbyrenegade.com, more articles coming out, and check us out on YouTube. We're trying to push a lot more video content on there. Please subscribe to us on there, and more good things coming. Stay in touch.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Renegade podcast. For more quality rugby strength and conditioning information, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com. Rugby Renegade, building machines.